In the quiet village of Tengora, nestled between rolling hills and dense forests, a baby girl named Zuleya was born under the eerie glow of a blood-red moon. The villagers gathered outside the small hut, whispering among themselves. It was said that children born under such a moon were marked by destiny, either to bring great fortune or terrible misfortune. Elder Selemu, the wisest man in the village, looked at the baby with deep concern. "This child carries an omen," he murmured. "She will either rise to greatness or bring ruin to all." Some villagers nodded in agreement, while others scoffed, believing it to be nothing more than an old man's superstition. Despite the whispers and warnings, Zuleya's father, Barasa, was filled with joy. He was a respected hunter, known for his skill and bravery, and he saw nothing but beauty in his newborn daughter. He held her close, vowing to protect her no matter what. But not everyone in the household shared his love. His wife, Nyamari, Zuleya's stepmother, watched the baby with cold, calculating eyes. From the moment she laid eyes on Zuleya, she despised her. To Nyamari, the girl was nothing but a bad omen, a stain on their family, and she would do everything in her power to rid herself of the child. Life in Barasa's home changed the day Zuleya's mother died. No one knew exactly what happened. Some said she fell sick, others whispered that she had been cursed. But in the end, she was gone, leaving Zuleya motherless in a world that was already against her. Her father, once a strong and joyful man, was drowning in grief, too lost in his sorrow to see what was happening around him. And while he mourned, Nyamari, his second wife, wasted no time in taking full control of the household. At first, she pretended to care for Zuleya, offering false sympathy while planting seeds of doubt in Barasa's mind. "Ever since that child was born, misfortune has followed us," she would say, shaking her head. "Your wife is dead, your hunts are failing, and the villagers whisper behind our backs. Can't you see? She is cursed." Grief made Barasa weak, and slowly, Nyamari's poisonous words filled his heart. He began to look at his daughter differently, as if her mere presence was a burden he could no longer bear. Zuleya, once his precious girl, was now treated as an outsider in her own home. Nyamari wasted no time in showing her true colors. She ordered Zuleya to do all the housework, cleaning, cooking, fetching water, and tending to the animals, while her own son Jabari lounged in luxury, eating the finest meals and wearing the best clothes. Zuleya was given only scraps to eat and rags to wear. If she complained, Nyamari would strike her. If she was too slow, she would be beaten. And if she cried, Nyamari would sneer and say, "Tears won't save you, cursed girl." Barasa, though present in the home, was blind to his daughter's suffering. He no longer saw the bruises on her arms or the hunger in her eyes. Whenever Zuleya tried to speak, Nyamari would silence her with a sharp glare. "She lies," she would tell Barasa. "She is trying to turn you against me, just as her mother tried to curse this house before she died." And Barasa, broken and defeated, would simply turn away. Jabari, spoiled and cruel, followed his mother's lead. He mocked Zuleya, laughed when she fell, and took pleasure in making her life harder. He would trip her while she carried heavy baskets, spill food so she would have to clean twice, and tell her she was worthless. "You should be grateful we even let you stay here," he would say, smirking. Each day felt longer than the last, but Zuleya did not give up. No matter how much she suffered, she held on to hope. She believed that one day her father would open his eyes, that someone would see the truth, that maybe, just maybe, her life would not always be like this. But she did not know that Nyamari had already decided her fate, and the worst was yet to come. Nyamari had grown tired of Zuleya. No matter how much she beat her, starved her, or humiliated her, the girl still survived. Every day, she watched Zuleya endure, and it filled her with rage. She wanted her gone, erased from existence, never to be seen again. But she knew that simply killing the girl would be too risky. If anyone found out, the villagers might turn against her. No, she needed a plan that would rid her of Zuleya forever, without anyone suspecting a thing. One evening, as she sat outside sharpening a knife, an idea crept into her mind. Hyena Gorge, a place feared by all in Tengora. The deep, rocky valley was home to packs of hungry hyenas, beasts that showed no mercy, tearing apart anything that entered their territory. No one who had wandered into the gorge had ever returned. The villagers believed it was cursed, a place where lost souls screamed in the night. Nyamari smiled to herself. It was perfect. If Zuleya disappeared there, no one would question it. They would assume she had been attacked by the beasts, and there would be nothing left of her to prove otherwise. For days, Lunari planned carefully. She waited for the right moment, pretending to be kinder to Zuleya so the girl wouldn't suspect anything. She even gave her extra food one evening, smiling sweetly. "You have been working hard," she said in a voice so soft it made Zuleya uneasy. It was the first time she had ever heard kindness from her stepmother, and it felt wrong, like the silence before a storm. That night, when the village was asleep and the full moon hung in the sky, Lunari crept into Zuleya's sleeping corner. She placed a hand over the girl's mouth before she could scream. "Not a sound!" she hissed, her fingers digging into Zuleya's skin. "Get up, now!" Half asleep and terrified, Zuleya obeyed. Lunari grabbed her arm and pulled her out of the house, dragging her through the quiet village, past the empty huts, and onto the dark path leading to the wilderness. "Where are we going?" Zuleya whispered, but Lunari didn't answer. She only tightened her grip and walked faster. They walked for what felt like hours, the cold wind biting at Zuleya's skin. The trees grew denser, their twisted branches blocking out the stars. A deep, distant howling made her shiver. She knew that sound. Hyenas. Finally, they reached the edge of the gorge. The land dipped down sharply, forming a deep valley of jagged rocks and darkness. A foul smell hung in the air, the scent of death. Lunari turned to face Zuleya, her eyes dark and full of hatred. "This is where your journey ends," she said coldly. Zuleya's heart pounded. "Please," she begged. "I haven't done anything to you." Lunari smirked. "Your existence is reason enough." Without another word, she shoved Zuleya forward. The girl stumbled, falling onto her knees at the very edge of the gorge. The sound of snapping branches and rustling leaves filled the air. The hyenas had smelled fresh prey. Lunari took a step back. "No one survives here," she said, her voice almost amused. "You will be nothing but bones by morning." She turned and walked away, leaving Zuleya trembling in the darkness. As the first glowing eyes appeared in the bushes, Zuleya knew she had only moments to live. Zuleya stood frozen, her breath shallow, her body trembling. The moment Lunari disappeared into the night, the air around her grew thick with danger. A low, guttural growl echoed from the bushes. Then another. The rustling of dry leaves sent chills down her spine. Slowly, pairs of glowing eyes appeared in the darkness, circling her like flickering lanterns in the night. The hyenas had come. She could hear the crunch of their paws against the dirt, the sound of their heavy breathing, the occasional snap of their powerful jaws. The moonlight glinted off their sharp teeth, making them look even more terrifying. Zuleya's heart pounded so loudly, she thought the beasts might hear it. She knew what came next. One of the hyenas stepped forward, its spotted coat barely visible in the shadows. Its ears twitched, its nose lifted, sniffing the air. It licked its lips. The others followed, inching closer, forming a deadly circle around her. Zuleya's body refused to move. Fear had locked her in place. Her mind screamed for her to run, to fight, to do something, but she knew it was useless. These creatures were hunters. They were stronger, faster, merciless. If she tried to run, they would tear her apart before she could take 3 steps. The leader of the pack let out a deep snarl, crouching low, ready to pounce. This was it. This was how she would die. Alone, abandoned, nothing but a meal for the beasts of the night. But then, something changed. Just as the hyena lunged, a deep, commanding voice rang through the air. It was not loud, yet it seemed to shake the very ground beneath her. "Stop!" The word was soft, but it carried weight, as if the darkness itself had spoken. Zuleya barely had time to process it when the impossible happened. The hyenas halted. Their snarls faded into uneasy whimpers. Their ears flattened against their heads. The leader, the one who had been ready to strike, tucked its tail between its legs and backed away. From the shadows, a figure stepped forward. Zuleya's breath caught in her throat. It was a woman, but unlike any she had ever seen. She was draped in long, tattered robes that blended with the night itself. Her skin was dark and weathered, her hair wild and streaked with silver. But it was her eyes that held the most power, piercing, golden, glowing like the moon. The woman moved slowly, her presence commanding, her gaze locked onto the hyenas. Without a word, she lifted her hand. The beasts whined and lowered themselves to the ground, as if bowing before her. Then, one by one, they turned and disappeared into the night, vanishing as quickly as they had come. Zuleya stood in stunned silence. The woman finally looked at her, a knowing smile on her lips. "I have been waiting for you," she said. Zuleya's body remained tense, her heart pounding like a drum inside her chest. The hyenas had vanished into the night, but the fear still clung to her skin. The old woman before her was unlike anyone she had ever seen. The moonlight bathed her in an eerie glow, making her appear both mystical and ancient. Her tattered robes swayed gently in the wind, as if they had a life of their own. Her silver-streaked hair fell wildly over her shoulders, framing a face lined with wisdom and time. But it was her eyes, those glowing, golden eyes, that made Zuleya's breath hitch. They held a power she could not understand, a force that seemed to see through her very soul. The woman raised a hand, her fingers moving in strange, deliberate patterns, as she whispered in a language that was both foreign and familiar. The air around them grew thick, as if the night itself was listening. A strange energy pulsed through the ground, through the trees, through Zuleya's very bones. She could feel it, deep inside her, like a distant memory stirring awake. Then, just as suddenly as it had begun, the woman lowered her hand, and the world seemed to exhale. The tension lifted, the night softened, and silence fell between them. Who are you?" Zuleya finally managed to whisper. Her voice came out small, uncertain. The woman studied her for a moment before speaking. "I am called Mama Kari," she said, her voice rich and steady, carrying the weight of someone who had seen many lifetimes. "And I have been waiting for you." Zuleya's brows furrowed in confusion. "Waiting for me? But how?" Mama Kari gave a knowing smile, her golden eyes twinkling like stars. "Because your fate was written long before this night. The blood moon marked your birth, and destiny has guided your path here. You are not meant to die in the jaws of hyenas, child. You are meant for something far greater." Zuleya shook her head, unable to understand. No, I am just a girl. I am nothing. My stepmother threw me away like a piece of trash. My father did not even search for me. I am worthless." Mama Kari's gaze sharpened. She stepped closer, gently placing a weathered hand under Zuleya's chin, lifting her face. "Do not let the lies of others shape who you are," she said firmly. "You are not worthless. You are not nothing. You are special, Zuleya, in ways you do not yet understand." Tears burned in Zuleya's eyes. She had never heard those words before, never felt this kind of warmth from anyone. A part of her wanted to believe the old woman, but another part was too afraid to hope. Mama Kari stepped back and gestured toward the trees. "Come, the night is long, and you have much to learn." Zuleya hesitated. Could she trust this woman? Did she have any other choice? She glanced at the dark wilderness behind her, the place where Niamari had left her to die. There was nothing for her there. But here, with this strange woman who had saved her life, there was a chance, a small, fragile hope, that maybe, just maybe, she could become something more. Swallowing hard, she stepped forward and followed Mama Kari into the night. Zuleya followed Mama Kari through the thick forest, her bare feet brushing against damp leaves and soft earth. The trees stretched high above them, their branches whispering secrets to the wind. Strange sounds filled the air, crickets chirping, owls hooting, distant howls in the night. But for the first time, she did not feel afraid. There was something different about this place, something alive. After what felt like hours, they arrived at a small clearing where an ancient hut stood. Smoke curled from a hole in the roof, carrying the scent of burning herbs. The walls were made of woven branches, covered in dried leaves and strange symbols carved into the wood. It looked like it had stood there for centuries, untouched by time. Mama Kari led Zuleya inside. The air was warm, filled with the scent of spices, and something earthy, something old. Shelves lined the walls, overflowing with clay pots, dried roots, and shimmering stones. In the center of the room, a small fire flickered, casting dancing shadows on the walls. "Sit," Mama Kari said, motioning to a mat on the ground. Zuleya obeyed, watching as the old woman reached for a wooden bowl filled with dark liquid. She stirred it slowly, her golden eyes glowing in the firelight. "You have suffered much, child," Mama Kari said, her voice gentle but firm. "You believe you are weak, abandoned, unworthy of love." She paused, looking at Zuleya closely. "But that is not who you are. You were never meant to live a life of suffering." Zuleya frowned, her heart heavy with doubt. "I don't understand. My stepmother hated me. My father did not protect me. If I was meant for something greater, why did my life turn out this way?" Mama Kari placed the bowl before her. "Because those who fear power will do anything to destroy it before it rises." Zuleya blinked in confusion. Power? The old woman nodded. You are not just an ordinary girl, Zuleya. You are the last of the Lunari clan. The name sent a strange shiver through Zuleya's spine. She had never heard it before, yet it felt familiar, as if it had always been buried deep inside her. The Lunari were once a great people, Mamakari continued. They could speak to the creatures of the wild, command the winds, and harness the energy of the moon. They were feared and respected across the land. But long ago, they were betrayed, hunted, and nearly wiped out. Zuleya's breath caught in her throat. And I am one of them, Mamakari nodded. The blood of the Lunari runs through your veins. That is why the hyenas did not kill you. They recognized you, and that is why your stepmother feared you, because deep inside, she knew you were different. Zuleya's hands trembled as she stared into the fire. Her whole life she had believed she was nothing. But now, the truth was unfolding before her. She was not weak. She was not cursed. She was powerful. The days in the wilderness turned into weeks, and the weeks into years. Under Mamakari's guidance, Zuleya transformed from a frightened girl into a warrior of the wild. The training was not easy. Every day, she woke before sunrise, her body aching from the tasks Mamakari set before her. She learned to move silently through the forest, to listen to the whispers of the wind, and to understand the language of the animals. The hyenas, once feared creatures, became her closest companions. At first, she had been terrified of them, remembering the night she had nearly been torn apart. But Mamakari taught her to stand without fear, to look into their glowing eyes and see not monsters, but beings of great wisdom and loyalty. Slowly, they accepted her as one of their own. She ran with them under the moonlight, feeling the wind rush past her face, her laughter mixing with their wild cries. Mamakari also trained her mind. She told her the stories of the Lunari clan, the forgotten people who had once lived in harmony with nature. She taught her the power of herbs, how to heal wounds with a touch, and how to listen to the voice of the earth. Zuleya learned that strength was not just in the body, but in the mind and spirit. But while Zuleya grew stronger, the village of Tangora suffered. Niamari and Jabari ruled with cruelty, taking what they wanted and punishing those who dared to speak against them. The villagers whispered in fear, their once happy homes now filled with misery. Barasa, once a proud hunter, had become a shadow of himself. Regret gnawed at his heart, but he was too weak to stand against his wife and son. He spent his days drinking, his eyes hollow, his soul burdened with guilt. Despite the darkness in Tangora, no one suspected that the girl they had cast away was still alive, and they certainly did not know that she was waiting for the day she would return. The night was still, and the air was thick with the scent of earth and rain. Zuleya sat by the fire, watching the flames dance, her mind restless. She had trained for years, had grown strong, but something deep within her told her that her journey was not yet complete. Mamakari, sitting across from her, stirred a pot of herbs, her golden eyes reflecting the fire's glow. She had been silent all evening, as if waiting for the right moment. Then she spoke. "The time has come, child," she said, her voice low and filled with something that made Zuleya shiver. "The blood moon will rise again soon, and with it, fate will call you back to Tangora." Zuleya frowned. Why now? What does the blood moon mean? Mamakari sighed and placed a hand on Zuleya's. Long ago the spirits whispered a prophecy. When the blood moon rises again, the one who was cast into darkness shall return, and the betrayer will face the wrath of the beasts. You, my child, were born under a blood moon. That night, your fate was sealed. The village tried to erase you, but destiny does not forget. Zuleya felt a strange sensation in her chest, a mixture of fear, excitement, and something else she could not name. She had spent years healing, growing, learning to be at peace with the past, but the past had never been at peace with her. Niamari and Jabari had stolen her childhood, taken everything from her, and left her for dead. They had ruled with cruelty, filling Tangora with suffering, and now the spirits were telling her it was time to return. But what if I am not ready? Zuleya whispered. Mamakari chuckled, her eyes filled with wisdom. You have been ready for a long time. You only need to believe it. The spirits have already chosen you. That night, Zuleya could not sleep. She stood outside, staring at the sky, where the moon hung heavy and bright. Memories of the past came rushing back, the pain, the hunger, the nights she cried herself to sleep. She had thought she had left that weak girl behind, but now she realized that girl was still inside her, waiting for justice. As dawn approached, she knew what she had to do. She would return to Tengora, not as the broken child they had cast away, but as something else, something stronger, something the village would never forget. The night was thick with silence, broken only by the distant howl of the wind. A blood-red moon hung in the sky, casting an eerie glow over the village of Tengora. The villagers had gathered in the marketplace, whispering among themselves. There was something in the air, a strange, unexplainable tension. Then, from the shadows, a figure emerged. She walked with slow, steady steps, her posture straight, her gaze unwavering. Her long, dark cloak billowed behind her, and her presence seemed to make the very air grow heavy. Zuleya had returned. Gasps echoed through the crowd as people stumbled back, their eyes wide with disbelief. The girl they had abandoned, the child they had cast into the jaws of death, was standing before them. But she was no longer the frail, helpless girl they had once known. She was taller, stronger, and there was something unsettling in her eyes, a quiet power, an untamed force that sent chills down their spines. Women clutched their children. Men exchanged uneasy glances. Some murmured prayers under their breath. "It's her," one villager whispered. "The cursed child. She lives." From the largest hut in the village, Nyamari stepped out, drawn by the commotion. She wore a fine robe, her face painted with the pride of a woman who had long ruled without challenge. But as her eyes landed on the figure in the marketplace, her breath caught in her throat. Her heart pounded painfully against her chest. It couldn't be. Zuleya's gaze locked onto hers. Nyamari staggered back, her mind racing. It was impossible. She had left this girl to die, thrown her to the hyenas under the cold moon. Yet here she was, standing tall, alive, unbroken. The silence stretched between them, thick with unspoken words. Zuleya took another step forward. "Did you miss me, mother?" she asked, her voice calm but carrying the weight of years of suffering. Nyamari felt her body tremble, a cold sweat forming on her brow. The past had returned to haunt her, and for the first time in her life, she was truly afraid. The village of Tengora stood frozen in fear. The blood moon cast a crimson glow over the land, painting everything in eerie shades of red. No one dared to move. No one dared to breathe too loudly. All eyes were on Zuleya, the girl who had returned from the darkness, the girl who should have been dead. Nyamari's lips trembled as she stared at her stepdaughter. The power in Zuleya's gaze was unbearable. It burned through her like fire, making her knees weak. She had spent years ruling this village with cruelty, making people bow before her, making Barasa believe every twisted lie she whispered in his ear. But now, she was the one who felt small. Zuleya did not speak. She did not need to. She simply lifted her hand. A low, rumbling growl came from the shadows. Then another, and another. Glowing eyes appeared in the darkness, surrounding Nyamari. The villagers gasped and stepped back, their fear growing with every second. The creatures moved forward, stepping into the light. Hyenas. Dozens of them. Their eyes gleamed with something unnatural, something terrifying. Their snarls echoed through the village, sending chills down spines. Nyamari's breath hitched. Her legs gave out beneath her, and she collapsed onto the ground. She had been powerful once, had controlled everything in this village. But now, she was at the mercy of the very beasts she had sent to devour Zuleya. "Please," she gasped, her voice cracking. "Zuleya, my daughter." Zuleya tilted her head, her expression unreadable. "Daughter?" she repeated, her voice soft but sharp like a blade. "You threw me to the hyenas. You let them rip me apart in the dark." Tears streamed down Nyamari's face. She clawed at the dirt, trying to crawl backward, but the hyenas closed in, their growls growing louder. "It was a mistake," she whimpered. "I was blinded by fear. I only did what I thought was best." Zuleya remained still. The village watched in silence. No one stepped forward to help Nyamari. No one spoke in her defense. They had seen her cruelty for years. They had watched as she turned Barasa against his own daughter, as she ruled the household like a queen, as she allowed Jabari to mistreat those beneath him. "Please," Nyamari begged again, "spare me. I will leave. I will go far away. You will never see me again." The hyenas crept closer. Their jaws snapped in the air, their eyes locked onto their prey. Zuleya finally spoke, her voice quiet, almost a whisper. "You left me to die in the wilderness." She paused, then with the faintest tilt of her head, gave the silent command. The hyenas lunged. Nyamari's scream pierced the night as the beasts dragged her into the darkness. The villagers watched, horror-stricken, but no one moved to stop it. And then, just like that, she was gone. Barasa fell to his knees, his body trembling as he clutched his chest. His face, once proud and strong, was now filled with sorrow and regret. Tears streamed down his cheeks as he looked up at his daughter, the daughter he had abandoned, the daughter he had believed to be a curse. "Zuleya," he whispered, his voice breaking. "Forgive me. I was blind. I let her poison my heart against you." The villagers stood in silence, watching the mighty hunter of Tangora reduced to a broken man. They had never seen him so weak, never seen him cry. But now, the weight of his sins had crushed him. Zuleya stepped closer, her golden eyes unreadable. The blood moon bathed her in its glow, making her look almost otherworldly. She did not speak for a long time, and Barasa feared that she would turn away, that she would cast him aside, just as he had cast her away all those years ago. But then, she bent down, reaching out to him. Her hand rested gently on his head. "I forgive you," she said, her voice soft but firm, "but I cannot stay." Barasa sobbed, bowing his head. He did not deserve her mercy, yet she had given it freely. He had lost his wife, and he had lost his daughter once before. Now, he was losing her again, but this time, it was because of his own actions. Suddenly, an angry voice cut through the moment. "This is nonsense!" Jabari shoved his way through the crowd, his face twisted with rage. He had always been given everything. His mother had made sure of that. He had lived in luxury while Zuleya suffered, and he had never once cared. But now, he saw his power slipping away. His mother was gone. His father, once strong and commanding, was nothing more than a weeping old man. And the village, the very people who had once feared and obeyed him, were watching, waiting to see what would happen next. "You think you can just walk in here and take control?" Jabari sneered, stepping toward Zuleya. "You're nothing but a wild girl with a pack of filthy beasts." The hyenas growled, their glowing eyes locking onto him. Jabari scoffed, pretending not to be afraid. "What? You think I'm scared?" He took another step forward, but the moment he did, one of the hyenas lunged, snapping its jaws just inches from his leg. Jabari stumbled back, his bravado vanishing. More hyenas crept closer, their growls deep and menacing. The villagers whispered among themselves. "Maybe it's time you learned what it feels like to be hunted," Zuleya said coldly. Panic filled Jabari's eyes. He turned and ran, pushing past the villagers, sprinting toward the wilderness. The hyenas did not chase him, but they did not have to. The jungle had no mercy for those who had spent their lives stepping on others. Jabari vanished into the darkness, and no one ever saw him again. Zuleya stood at the edge of the village, the wind whispering through the trees as the blood moon cast its glow upon her. Behind her, the people of Tangora watched in silence, their faces filled with awe and fear. They had once called her cursed, had turned their backs on her, but now they saw the truth. She was not a bringer of misfortune. She was a force of justice, a protector of the weak. Barasa, still kneeling, looked up at his daughter with sorrow in his eyes. He had begged for her forgiveness, and she had given it, but he knew she would never truly return to him. The daughter he had abandoned was no longer just a girl. She was something greater now, something beyond the reach of ordinary men. Zuleya turned away from the village and walked toward the wilderness. The hyenas, her faithful companions, followed silently, their glowing eyes flickering in the darkness. The villagers whispered among themselves, wondering where she would go, what would become of her. Some believed she would vanish into the shadows, never to be seen again. Others feared she would return if injustice ever took root in Tangora again. Years passed, and stories of the Moon Guardians spread far and wide. Travelers spoke of a mysterious woman who roamed the forests. Her presence felt only under the light of the full moon. She was said to be neither human nor spirit, but something in between, a guardian of the night, a protector of the lost. Some claimed to have seen her in their darkest moments, just as danger closed in. A wounded traveler lost in the jungle, a child taken by raiders, a widow robbed of her home. Each time, they spoke of glowing eyes in the darkness, of hyenas circling like silent protectors, and of a woman cloaked in moonlight who delivered swift justice before disappearing into the shadows. The wicked feared her name. Bandits who ventured too deep into the forests never returned. Greedy chiefs who mistreated their people found themselves haunted by unseen eyes, their power slipping away as if fate itself had turned against them. They whispered her name in fear, the Moon Guardian. Yet those who were kind, those who were helpless, felt no fear when they spoke of her. To them, she was a legend of hope, a reminder that even in the darkest times, justice would always find a way. And so, under the glow of the full moon, deep in the heart of the wilderness, Zuleya walked on, her hyenas at her side. She had no need for a throne, no desire for revenge. She had become something far greater than the girl who had once been cast away. She was the guardian of the forgotten, the protector of the night. And in the village of Tangora, when the wind howled through the trees and the moon shone bright, the people still whispered her name, knowing that she was always watching, always waiting, ready to return when the world needed her once more.